Lou asked, hey, in the previous sessions, uh, I mentioned something that when this pattern happened, it should collapse or work right away if it doesn't get out. Could you point me to a video that might speak to that? Or yeah, it's the critical states and compound critical states. Here's the or this video or last night's discussion. Look, there's two kinds of trade patterns that we have. I'm going to cover them when I get over here. But some of them are really associated with I want to find critical states, and especially radioactive compound critical states, because the difference between the setup and the action is enormous. And there's something exceptional about the difference between A and B. Something happens that makes things just explode beyond all rationality. That's so if I have a standard behavior, and this is the average behavior, and this whole thing is the normal zone, then I have the abnormal zone when things are either abnormally volatile or abnormally quiet. Now, if I think about patterns where there's no volatility, what I want is things like cows eating grass. I see that price is behaving with normal volatility and has sort of this wandering quality to it that when I put a regression line on it, it just looks like this. And maybe there's some little dips and peaks and valleys, but it kind of looks like that. And so when I draw that strict regression line, I'm betting that the regression line is what's true. And I can just decide, you know what? I'm just going to buy this thing now and quit worrying about it. And I'm going to have a wide enough stop loss that parallels that stays well out of the normal noise of this thing. And I have this very comfortable buffer. I have this very comfortable buffer over here, which is going to keep me in that trade as long as that broad trend is continuing. Long-term buy and hold of relative strength momentum leaders that last weeks, months, quarters, and years. Relative strength plus with a wide stop, and then enough of them inside my herd that I can look at my herd of 30 to 100 symbols and say that at some given moment, these are the ones that are the relative strength winners, and these are the ones that are just getting murdered, and these are the ones that are average. And so I am just gonna concentrate on these little guys that are inside above average but not super abnormal yet, that I'm watching those as candidates to become the exceptional leaders that are freaking amazing. That's what blended monthly rebalancing and the weekly review of the longer term systems is designed to do. The sorting mechanism just says, look, I just want those things, and I just need to find the demarcation line. And that's what the regression line fractals are doing, and blended monthly rebalancing are doing. So certain strategies like RLFF, channeling, 551W, triple screen, blended monthly rebalancing. These things are designed to find cows eating grass as they're moving towards market and just lets them be what they're going to be. The absence of volatility, just slow growth. That's the whole thing behind long-term trend following, long-term buy and hold, and asset allocation. And I'm just using a simple sorting strategy to find those four categories. And I want to be in the green ones, and I want to study the white ones so that I can catch them as they become green and stay green. It's a separate strategy to say, hey, let me do something different down here, but I'm not even trying to do anything with that. Those are opportunities that are a different system altogether. So those are strategies that look like cows eating grass. The other thing is, if I'm looking instead for critical state, compound critical states, I'm saying that there is something in this run up to the present which highlights this as an exceptionally different moment in which, going forward here, as soon as I get a trigger, so I take the setup plus a trigger, it takes a trigger, and then I can expect things like an ambush, a stampede, a coiled spring under pressure is relieved and it goes boing, or it's a jack in the box, or that's the trigger that suddenly takes this loaded thing and it becomes an avalanche of movement. If that's the case, this thing better happen fast. Why? Because I took a position with a really tight risk box when that trigger happened, and that thing better just go so that I can get this amazing move. And if it doesn't happen right away, that I can just get out, because the expected abnormal behavior did not occur. The dog did not bark. And now suddenly this hypothesis that I was in a pre-avalanche condition, ready for things to explode, didn't work. I stepped on a landmine, but instead of blowing up, it was a dud. So there's a cost of taking the position and it doesn't explode, and I'm going to take these little fractional losses or -1R losses or whatever. But when they work, it should go. So if things come into the station and now I've set it up and I have a favorable condition for that, and I get my little trigger, it better go, or it's going to be fake one, go two. But if it fakes one and then goes nothing, I'm taking tiny little losses a lot in that space, which means I got to get out. I can't believe that I picked the right direction. I didn't pick the direction. I got a noise that sounded like what could be the beginning of an avalanche or a stampede or something, and it just didn't trigger. The herd did not move. Everything was set up for it to move. They just decided not to wake up. I guess they were just really, really tired. You know, when the herd is asleep, you don't know if they're exhausted or if they're just sleeping lightly, ready to break. I don't know where in their little sleep state they are. Are they extremely exhausted and it takes a lot of movement to trigger them? Or are they very light sleep and the first little whisper of a hint causes them to go? I don't know. Well, if you have these kinds of patterns, the expected time of the trade says, hey, if it takes more than 6 bars or 4 to 6 bars, 5 plus or minus 1, your mileage may vary, then it ain't working. Why? Because you had 30 bars of setup usually to create the statistical anomaly of a compound critical state. So if in 5 bars, in 1/6 or 1/5 of the time or 1/6 of the time, The trigger happened, remember? The trigger happened, so you got in, and if in 5 bars it hasn't done that, then they're not behaving according to the statistical expectation, so get out. Yeah, but what if they start working, then get in? Re-entry is the key to sanity. If the trigger happens again and they start, the trigger is still the trigger. Remember, if there was a range compression, which is a feature of all of these patterns, there is a range compression. And if the little trigger didn't happen and it just came back in and started monkeying around, guess what you have? You have more range compression. So the trigger, maybe with a minor adjustment based on that little false move, maybe it's a little bit different, but it's approximately the same trigger. It's still in a condition of range compression. So when it goes, the same reason that made that a good decision here makes it a good decision there. So I'll just say 5 bars. But that's why I say 5 bars, because that's 1/6 of the 30 bars that it took to set up the statistical condition. Hey, guess what? If you have a normal and then a plus or minus 1 standard deviation, that means 1/3 of the time it's inside here, and 1/6 of the time it's one of these extraneous conditions. So 6 or 5. If it hasn't worked in 5 bars, yeah, it didn't work. Next bar, it could work because the trigger hit. So that's a fuzzy number, but you can work on that. And just remember, I would rather be out wishing I was in than in wishing I was out. So just get out and then re-enter. As long as you don't care about being right, you can be safe and active.